Since the year 2000, Taiwan has maintained a strict quota. Only 10 Chinese films are allowed in our cinemas per year. And here is the strange part. The winners are chosen by a jury of experts. Right, they are literally chosen by a lucky draw. Hello, I'm Wonder Weng at Radio Taiwan International. You're listening to Cinematic Motif, and this is the third episode of the A Screen for All series, in which we explore the freedom and inclusivity of Taiwan's film industry. In our previous episodes, we've already looked at the grand stage of the Golden Horse and the personal story of exile for Hong Kong filmmakers. But today, we look at a war that is not built of bricks, but of numbers. Today we ask, is our national security a matter of chance, or is the lottery just a way to avoid the hard conversations about censorship? I'm once again joined by Wonder Weng, a member of Taiwan's Film Critics Society and the festival programmer. Wanda explains how this 10-film limit works in our system.
This quota system for Chinese films started back in the year 2000. Essentially, it limits the number of mainland Chinese films shown in Taiwan cinema to just 10 per year. In the beginning, it was first come, first served system based on who submitted their application first, but that raised a lot of eyebrows. People would worry about black box deal or lack of transparency. You might ask, why not just let the jury decide which 10 films are the best? I think, the problem there is finding a fair standard. A jury could just as easily be accused of bias, gatekeeping, or even bribery. So the government ended up with this lottery system. I know it sounds crazy to be the lucky draw decide cultural policy, but honestly, it is the easiest way for them to say fair. You ask if this is political censorship? What I think is the government used the lottery to stay out of trouble. If luck is the judge, then the government doesn't have to act like the dog police. Since every film distributor sends a representative to watch the draw, we can at least rule out foreplay. But here's the irony. One of the original reasons for the quota was political, to prevent an influx of main melody films, which are essentially high-budget propaganda that promote CCP policies. The reality is that these propaganda films still enter the lottery every year, and sometimes they actually win a slot. This is why people criticize the system. The government can't legally stop them from joining the draw, so every year officials are probably holding their breath, secretly hoping the most controversial title didn't get picked. Now, do I think protecting the local industry is necessary? I would say yes, actually. Some critics argue that Chinese film wouldn't perform that well here anyway, so the quota isn't needed, but I'm not so sure about that. Actually, market trends can change very quickly. Like, look at Train to Busan, 时速列车 in 2016. Before that, Taiwanese audience didn't really go to see a Korean movie, actually. But now, people are more than willing to head to the theater for a Korean film. We can't just assume the same thing won't happen again. Beyond policy, I think the biggest issue is asymmetry. On the surface, China looks more open because they didn't have a specific 10-film limit for us. But the catch is political censorship. Taiwanese films have to pass a strict ideological review to enter the Chinese market. Until China allowed Taiwanese film to be screened there freely without censorship, I don't think we should talk about tearing down our wall.
But we live in 2026. We have iQIYI, Netflix, and TikTok. If the digital border is already wide open, why does it matter if a movie theater in Taipei shows a Chinese blockbuster or not? What is at stake?
I have to be honest, even though I suppose some level of protection, I do feel a bit conflicted or even a little guilty about it. The truth is, countless Chinese productions from hit TV series to viral short video have already bypassed this quantity wall. They are streaming directly into our homes and phones. This platform actually have a much larger audience and a deeper influence on our daily lives. But I believe there is still a fundamental difference between a movie theater and a stream platform. On a stream side, the capacity is infinite. Adding one more Chinese film doesn't push out a Taiwanese film. But in a cinema, there are only so many prime time slots to go around. If Chinese film were allowed to flood the theater, they wouldn't hurt the massive Hollywood blockbuster. They would crowd it out our local Taiwanese film, which are already struggling to survive. Since we share the same language and because the Chinese industry is so massive, they are experts at making high-budget commercial hits. Taiwan only sees a production of that scale once every few years. If China sends these bigger budget movies over every year, starring the at-least celebrity, it's very likely they'll build a massive, loyal fan base here. And if these films carry subtle political message, showing how powerful the nation is, how happy the citizens are, or how friendly they are to minorities, audience might start getting brainwashed without even realize it. If the government has the power to keep it out of physical cinemas, I don't think that's necessarily the wrong move. That being said, if we are going to keep the quantity war, we really need to rethink the rules. We shouldn't be pushing main melody propaganda film in the same lottery as films that are actually banned in China.
But even with the current rules, the system fails sometimes. Wonder Weng highlighted a recent case that he calls a total scandal. That is the story of the film Black Dog, 狗镇.
I want to highlight one specific film that really exposed the flaw in our current system. I'm talking about the 2024 Chinese film Black Dog, 狗镇, directed by Guan Hu and starring Eddie Pan, Peng Yuyan. The fact that the movie never hit Taiwanese theater is, in my opinion, a huge red flag regarding how our government handles this policy. Originally, the Ministry of Culture had a very clear rule. Any film that wins an award at Cannes, Venice, Berlin, or the Oscar can be bypassed the quota and be screened in Taiwan. The idea was to ensure that high-quality artistic film reach Taiwanese audience. These so-called festival films are usually the opposite of state propaganda, so they were considered safe to let in. When Black Dog won the Uncertain Regard Prize, which is the top award of that prestigious category at Cannes, the Taiwanese distributor was thrilled. They started their marketing campaign and officially announced a release date, but then something crazy happened. After the promo material was already out there, the government suddenly moved the goalposts. They literally changed the rules, claiming that if the award wasn't from the main competition, it didn't count.
Yeah, it is. So for anyone who has been to Cannes or has watched the competition of Cannes Film Festival, actually the main competition and Uncertain Regard, these are the two main biggest competition at Cannes Film Festival.
It officially recognized category at Cannes.
Yes.
For the Ministry of Culture to set the ground rules and then flip the script at the last minute, to me that's a total scandal.
Yeah.
Because of the sudden change, Black Dog was forced back into the lottery system. It didn't get a luck number, so it never made it to the cinema. It's such a shame for Taiwanese moviegoers. This isn't some main melody propaganda film. It's a powerful, explosive piece of art cinema. It's exactly the kind of film our audience deserve to see, and the fact that they can't is a real loss.
I remember when I was in France earlier last year, my French friend, who is a cinephile, he asked me, have you already seen that movie, 狗镇? And I was like, okay, I haven't watched that one. And I feel like there is no promotion in Taiwan. So the fact was that actually the film could not be released in Taiwan because of the lottery draw system. And we were also talking about the Cannes Film Festival's Un Certain Regard. For example, the new film directed by Harris Dickinson, the films of Kristen Stewart, they were all part of the Un Certain Regard competition in the 2025 Cannes Film Festival. So it is a big category, but it is not in the rule of the quota system. If the lottery system does not work effectively, what is the alternative? I spoke with Wesley, a cinephile and also a law graduate student who specializes in public law and constitutional law. He proposes that we stop playing dice with our democracy and start looking at the actual content.
So my proposal, the key shift is from quantity-based control to a kind of content-sensitive or risk-based review. So first of all, the problem really lies in the Cross-Strait Act, 两岸人民关系条例. The act's legislative aim is to ban speech that could undermine our democratic constitutional order. Right now, the regulation in the Chinese film is really a random lottery pick to pick like 10 Chinese films from the pool, and these 10 films which really we couldn't know the content of it. It's just a lottery. So it's basically leaving our national security goes to chance. So what I propose is, instead of relying on a quantity-based regulation that treats all films as politically equivalent, I think the current review mechanism could be adjusted to like you said, the content review system. So I think we could utilize the existing committees, which is the film rating committee that already handles age ratings, and we could kind of let them assess whether a film poses a general threat to Taiwan's democratic constitutional orders. So that would kind of adjust it to be more conform to the legislative aim of the act itself.
And I wonder, are there any examples in the world that has done this sort of content-based review? And very specifically, in your research, you talked about West Germany's experience, and how could that country offer Taiwan some insight?
I think the West Germany experience is a perfect mirror for Taiwan. In Western Germany, right after the war, they did establish kind of committee like to censor, I wouldn't say censorship, to review communist film from entering West Germany. And it was a committee that caused some controversy because it struggled years with its vague legal grounds. But in 1972, the German Constitutional Court declared it constitutional. It laid out some important criteria for the defensive democracy in review. So, the defensive democracy can temporarily trump artistic freedom, which is the freedom of speech, but only if the film totally denies the value of free democratic basic order. So this kind of criteria should be, I think it's fairly clear that we can follow. Although Germany eventually stopped using their committee for every film and only saved it for extreme cases, in the times like these, the criteria really tells us what the bar of content review should be.
Wesley is clear. This isn't about blocking uncomfortable ideas. It's about protecting the constitutional order, and to prevent this from becoming a new form of censorship, he insists that every decision must be transparent and subject to judicial review.
So first, the criteria and the decisions should be reasoned, transparent, and publicly accessible. The most important thing is that it have to be subject to judicial review. And the second, the scope of the restriction should be extremely limited. It should focus only on films that actively undermine democratic constitutionalism, and not those that are merely critical, uncomfortable, or politically controversial. So, a content-based review, I think, does not have to mean that we should suppress some kind of viewpoint. Regulations like these should be able to address it and not fall into some kind of censorship. And this kind of regulation, I think, could conform to the legislative aim of the act.
You also argue that the law should only block films that refuse democracy or beautify authoritarianism. And isn't that line becoming impossible to draw right now as Chinese propaganda gets more sophisticated or more mild sometimes?
It's true that the line is becoming harder to follow or to draw. The first solution, I think, is to really look at the narrative structure and the representation in the film. Does the film really erase democratic agency, or does it really present the repression as necessary or inevitable? That's the first question. In assessing, in addition, for the kind of gray zone that you mentioned about, that is really hard to determine, I think we actually don't need a total ban on its distribution.
Okay.
We can use some kind of form restrictions, like limiting the time and the venue of the screening, a method that has already been used for a certain kind of indecency film, artistic films in Taiwan. So in the end, this is all about protecting the right targets, I think. So the irony of the 10 film quota right now is that it often blocks independent directors that really is critical toward the Chinese government, like director like Wang Jun or Lo Ye. They really can let some of the big budget propaganda in because they have more resources to apply multiple years, or really they just got lucky. So my way at least gives the quote-unquote good films a fair hearing based on their content.
Wonder also has another proposal. If we do not want to change the rules, at least we can adjust the standard.
Given the current tension between Taiwan and China, I realize the government probably isn't ready for a massive overhaul of the rule. But at the very least, we could be more flexible with specific cases. Right now, only winners from the Cannes, Venice, and Berlin or the Oscar can skip the lottery. Why not change that to any film that is simply selected, meaning it is in the official lineup? If it is selected, it should bypass the draw. That's what I think.
Actually, if it is selected in these competitions, it is probably not a main melody film, right?
Yeah, of course. Right. The Ministry of Culture doesn't need to worry that changing the rule will suddenly let propaganda film infiltrate Taiwan. Propaganda movies don't get selected for main competition at Cannes or Berlin or Venice. In the end, the only films that could actually benefit from the change are films or movies that clearly don't align with CCP policy anyway. As for the Golden Horse Award, the current rule said you only get a screen slot if you win Best Picture or Best Director. But look at the reality of the list the last few years. Beijing has been boycotting the festival. Any filmmaker from China who is brave enough to even enter the Golden Horse and is talented enough to get nominated is already making a huge statement. I believe any Chinese film that secures a Golden Horse nomination should be granted an exception from the lottery.
In our interview, Wonder specifically mentioned Lo Ye, a master in filmmaking who has stood bravely against the system and faced being blacklisted in China for it. His films, like so many others we've discussed, deserve more than a roll of the dice. In fact, his latest work in 2024, an unfinished film, 一部未完成的电影, which got its premiere at the Festival de Cannes in France, did not win the lottery and almost missed the chance to be released in Taiwan. It was only after the film won Best Narrative Feature and Best Director at the Golden Horse Awards that confirmed its theatrical release. As we conclude our series A Screen for All, we are reminded that Taiwan's true power isn't in its ability to exclude, but in its courage to include. Whether it is a blacklisted superstar, an exiled director, or a banned story, they all find their home here, and that is the freedom that we cherish in Taiwan. The screen is open for all. This has been Cinematic Motif, produced by me, Wonder Weng, for Radio Taiwan International. Thank you for tuning in for the past 3 weeks, and I'll see you next week.